Hey everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and welcome to my review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood here on Fandom Entertainment. This is the 9th movie from Quentin Tarantino. By his count, he considers Kill Bill to be one movie, so I guess we have to as well. And this is a film set in Los Angeles in 1969. It is a combination of the fictional story of Rick Dalton, a TV actor played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who's entering a transitional point in his career, and his best friend slash stuntman slash driver Cliff Booth, who's played by Brad Pitt. Rick's driver, his constant companion. Much of the movie follows these two characters and their daily lives in Hollywood as we see Rick navigating his way through guest starring appearances on TV movies, taking meetings, and hanging out at his Hollywood Hills home along with Cliff. But his Hollywood Hills home also happens to be next door to Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, two real-life people. In the summer of 1969, Sharon Tate was, of course, infamously a victim of the Manson family murders at the very house that is portrayed in the movie. And there's been a lot of questions speculating what kind of movie is Quentin Tarantino making here. It's combining fiction and reality. It's set in real-life Los Angeles, centering around real-life events. The Manson family is involved in this movie, as has been revealed, but I will not reveal myself what kind of movie this is or where the movie takes you, what the twists and turns of the movie are, because I think the movie largely relies on the audience not knowing what is going to happen next. Now, I think it's kind of ironic that this is probably the most star-studded as far as the top-line cast of any of Quentin Tarantino's films. When you look at people like Margot Robbie, who is playing Sharon Tate, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Brad Pitt. Al Pacino also makes an appearance in this movie. There's a lot of stars in this movie. However, I think it's also Quentin Tarantino's, in a way, least mainstream movie. Now, he's challenged the conventions of storytelling in a lot of movies before. Pulp Fiction largely made a splash back in 1994 because he challenged the idea of the conventional narrative, the kind of time shifting that so many movies have taken on in a post-Pulp Fiction era, so it doesn't seem like that much of a revolutionary technique, at least not as much as it did back in the early 90s. The movie that this movie reminds me of the most in Quentin Tarantino's filmography is actually my least favorite of Quentin Tarantino's movies, which is Death Proof. That was Tarantino's half of the Grindhouse double feature that he did with Robert Rodriguez. The Death Proof was then released as its own movie. But I actually really like this movie. They do share some similarities. I think what we've seen in the later parts of Quentin Tarantino's career, in the last, really for me, since Inglourious Basterds, post-Death Proof, is him taking all the skills that he's learned over his career as a director and applying them in new ways and interesting ways and experimenting with format or in bringing different kinds of history, different kinds of stories to the screen. And I think what he employs here in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that didn't quite work in Death Proof is a very deliberate and I would say almost tonal storytelling style. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood does not have one narrative that just thrusts you forward. A movie like Inglourious Basterds, which was several different plots, all with advancing narratives, all converging at the same time. That was a very propulsive movie. Even the dialogue scenes crackled with tension and suspense and fear. That's not what Tarantino is going for with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. More than anything else, he really spends a good chunk of the movie establishing the characters, establishing who they are, and establishing the feel of the city. He really wants to evoke Los Angeles and Hollywood in particular in 1969. This is a character piece. This is also a tone piece. It's not so much about one plot that drives everything forward. There aren't a whole lot of machinations that are happening that all culminate, although this movie certainly does culminate. What I found Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be more than anything was a series of setups and payoffs, both on a scene-by-scene level. Oftentimes, there are big chunks of the movie that are conversations or investigations that aren't thrill a minute. It doesn't have the rat-a-tat the speed and quickness that a lot of Tarantino movies have. Instead, they're very deliberate, but they pay off. They pay off either in comedy. Sometimes they pay off in a great character moment. They pay off later in the movie when you realize that it's established something that's going to come into play in the third act or beyond. Sometimes it's just to endear you to the characters or to bring you into their lives. There's a sequence that follows Sharon Tate, who again was a real life actor, who just following Margot Robbie around town for part of the day as she goes to see one of her own movies, which is playing at a theater. This idea of who these characters are they tragic characters? Are they not tragic characters? Where they are in their lives. It's a very introspective movie. It strips away a lot of the style that Tarantino has used throughout his career. It's observational. Even though it has such a big cast and a big budget and it's a big Hollywood release, in some ways it's his smallest movie. And I found that really interesting. At the same time, this is still Quentin Tarantino. And there are definitely parts of the movie that feel very Tarantino-esque, but he almost, it's like he knows when to use those and when to employ those. And the whole movie really is a wind-up. It's a wind-up to the third act and what happens in that third act. Now, the question I think for a lot of the audiences is going to be, is the wind-up worth the payoff? Is the first, let's say, 2 hours of the movie worth what the last 40 minutes of the movie contain? That is a good question, and I think it's a question that a lot of people are going to have to answer for themselves. It was a question that I was asking myself when we were watching the movie, because as I said, there are stretches of this movie that are more character-based, and I found myself sitting there sometimes wondering, where are we going with this? What is this establishing? Why are you choosing to show me this particular scene in this particular way? But at the end of the movie, when I saw where he was going with the film, I really did think that Tarantino constructed a complete portrait of this place and time, something that makes the title make sense by the time you get to certain things that happen in the film. I really do think that he has succeeded in doing what he set out to do, which is evoking a certain time and a certain era, building a small stable of characters. Really, despite the large number of the cast, the three main characters, DiCaprio's Rick Dalton, Brad Pitt's Cliff Booth, and Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate, are the core of the movie. And really, the relationship between Rick and Cliff is the heart of the film. And I really, 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 at the end of it, found myself enjoying what they had done. It is a journey. I think it is going to test a lot of people's patience. I understand if a lot of people might come out of this a little confused or a little disappointed, because it is unlike stuff that Quentin Tarantino has done in the past. But I found it refreshing. I actually like that in the later part of his career, and he's teased that, you know, maybe this is his last movie, or that he doesn't have a whole lot of movies left, that he may only do one or two more movies. If this is indeed the later part of Quentin Tarantino's career as a director, I like that he's taking the tools that he's employed in other movies and using them in new and interesting ways. And that's what I felt like this film was. But if you're going into this movie and expecting a pure adrenaline shot of Quentin Tarantino, that's not what you're in for in this movie. I think you're still in for something that's interesting, something that's different, something that's risky, but at the same time, something that I think you will leave knowing unmistakably that this was a Quentin Tarantino movie, because as I said, he knows what to do and when to employ the things that you know him for, maybe more so than ever in this film. And I think the way that he uses those touches and the way that he uses that style pays off in this movie in a big way for me. Whether it will do that in a big way for you, I don't know. The performances, I thought, were really good. Leonardo DiCaprio in particular, we know he's a great actor. He's an Oscar-winning actor. There's very few movies that he's not great in. However, I thought he was fantastic in this movie. I loved him as Rick Dalton. I thought he explored some things that we haven't seen him explore as an actor before on screen. I thought Brad Pitt was great in this movie, Margot Robbie. There's really the entire cast, down to some actors like Damian Lewis, who just have one scene in the film that really nailed their roles. So it's a big recommendation for me from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. However, I acknowledge that this is a little something different from Quentin Tarantino. It is long. It did feel its length a little bit, but the end result was worth it for me. I guess the question is, will it be worth it for you? So that's my thought on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Did you see the movie? What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, stay tuned here on Fandom Entertainment. We'll be bringing you the latest news and reviews every week. Till next time, thanks for watching.